Welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. Welcome to the show, everybody. We are so glad that you are here. A guest for you today. I need to have like trivia or something, and then have like the people pop up. That might be fun, but then I don't know. Anyway, I'll think of that for next time. You know how this goes. I'm Meg from ABCUSA, from Ministry Life, from all the things, from the show. If you've never watched it before, where have you been? Talking about ministry that's more than just in the pulpit. So today my guest for you is, drumroll and fanfare please, Reverend Dr. Jonathan D. Lawrence. Dr. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Meg. Thank you very much. This is great to be here. So I am an American Baptist minister, currently teaching at a Jesuit university and serving a United Church of Christ congregation. And so I am sort of covering a lot of bases, but have over the years been able to find some fun ways to blend ministry and teaching and stretch in different directions. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk about that today.
Yeah. And if that's not ecumenical, Jesuit, ABC, and UCC.
That's right.
I mean, I feel like you've got it. I feel like you kind of got it covered there.
Exactly. Well, and you add in the, let's see, I went to a Quaker college. I went to a Presbyterian seminary. I studied at University in Jerusalem and went to a Catholic university. And now I'm also on our interfaith board in Buffalo. And so some people get very confused and they think they say that I'm the one that's confused. But in many ways, it actually fits my journey, and it has been a lot of fun ways to interact with some great people.
So, and you grew up, right? You're a PK, you're a pastor's kid?
Yes. My dad is, Donald Lawrence, is an American Baptist pastor, retired now. He served churches in Connecticut, Rochester, Niagara Falls, Pittsburgh area, and Corning, New York, and retired in about 2020. Retired in 2000. 2020 sticks in my mind because of other issues, of course.
Other issues, COVID, and all those fun things. Oh my gosh. And I don't know, did you know my first church, the first church I was called to, was in upstate New York, was in Central Square. Mm-hmm. So you go Corning. That was one of the ones that where people talk about the good old days and all the jobs and
that's
all
right.
that was Corning was one of those places, and all the different jobs and things that have since left the area. But so you grew up. So was the plan for you always, ministry? Was that called a ministry? Did that happen?
Oh, heck no.
Okay.
I would often
were you like the rest of us who are like, no, I'm not going to do that?
That's right. Yeah, I would get are you going to follow after your father? And if I was in polite company, it would be heck no. You can fill in the blanks as to what it would have been otherwise. My plan as I started college was that I was going to do pre-med in college, go to med school, and I wanted to be a medical missionary. So as a PK, I had met people like Paul Fountain and some of the other people like that who had done amazing work in the mission field and serving people, and through the process of serving people, talking about Jesus, and not just going and talking about Jesus and saying, well, before we take care of anything else, you need to sit and pray. Right. And so, and through camps, I went to Camp Vick, and so of course heard the stories of the Vick family and their work in China, and through BYF conferences, I had in my mind that this is what I want to do. So I get to college at Haverford College in Philadelphia, and start out doing okay in the sciences until the day when I set my one lab experiment on fire, and was also kind of struggling at the time because our professor was giving us exams that the senior majors couldn't figure out, but he was yelling at us because we were clearly the worst students he'd ever had. And the joy was just sort of gone. I wasn't sure I was going to pass this class, and then just decided to take the flames as a sign. And of course, also had to, nobody was injured except for my pride. And I, of course, had to write my lab report explaining why I had no results because I'd been an idiot. And my lab partner, who's a good friend still today, is now a microbiologist. And he tells, I'm a cautionary tale to his students. So, but in the process, I started rethinking what I wanted to do. Medicine was out. And so I had gone, let's see, this would have been, I want to say December of 1990. There was a conference. It was called Celebrate. And it was the first time that many of the mainline denominations, their college student ministries, had come together in years. They'd met like during the 60s and 70s, and then it sort of fell off. And so it was a young adult conference in Louisville, I think it was. And we had about 30 or 40 American Baptist college students there. And then there were some much larger groups, about 3,000 people in total. Again, all the mainline groups. And the one thing I remember from that event is the last night we were there, they had communion. And of course, at first it started out really somber music because communion is serious, right? And the band, I don't know if they planned it or if they just sort of felt the vibe in the room, started playing livelier and livelier music. And even though we all had to like go and take communion in different spots because some people were taking it from the tray, some people were taking it from the cup, the Moravians had to have their special bread. And so in one way it felt like we were still divided, but we were all there, and people just started dancing. And I could see some people sort of giving stink eye of, this is communion, this is serious. But it's like the conference itself is called Celebrate. But anyways, during that time, it was amazing. Calvin Butts came and spoke to our American Baptist group. We had several other people, American Baptist historian, I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but he talked, and he, I'd grown up in the church. I'd gone to church camps. I had never heard most of these stories about our American Baptist heroes. And so through being at the conference, I found out information that Eastern Baptist, now Phillips, was holding their ministry exploration weekend. And I was right there in Philadelphia. So I said, okay, I'm going to go, but I'm still not going to be a minister, or congregational minister at least. And I was there. And I should add that because of being in Philadelphia, the church I went to, Manfred Brauch, who was president at Eastern at the time, was in the church. And I remember meeting him the first time I went, and I called my parents that night and I said, yeah, I met somebody who says he works at the seminary. His name is Manfred something. And my dad says, Manfred Brauch? He's the president. And I just thought it was so cool that, he was the president of the seminary, and he's just like, hi, I'm Manfred. I work at the seminary. Total chill.
Yeah. I love when they're like that. I love it.
Exactly. And so I went to the weekend and started to hear the things they were doing, all the different kind of ministries that were going on in Philadelphia. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I'm still not going to be a congregational minister, but this is a possible track. So for the rest of my time in college, I took some religion classes. I even, as a senior, got up every morning for 8 a.m. Greek class, thinking, this will help prepare me. And so I finished college. I was accepted into several seminaries, but then I deferred for a year because I had a chance to go to Jerusalem for a special program at Hebrew University, a post-baccalaureate one-year program studying human rights, politics, leadership, and I got a chance to travel around and visit archaeological sites. And this picture behind me is actually the Wadi Zin down in the Negev. And it was just an amazing year. And during that time, I started to crystallize the idea, okay, I definitely want to go to seminary. I feel a call, but my call is not to congregational pastoral ministry, it's to teaching. And so I then went to Pittsburgh Seminary, which I didn't really know at the time, but had a big archaeology museum and archaeology component. And so that, after my studies in Jerusalem, became a bigger component for me. And anytime I had electives where classmates might be taking things like youth ministry electives and other things that would fit their calls, I was bulking up on extra languages. So I got to take Ugaritic, and the final exam, translation exam for the Ugaritic class, was one of the stories about how the Canaanite god Baal got drunk at table with all the other gods and passed out and fell asleep under the table. So, all kinds of fun stuff. You can't make this up.
No, that's amazing.
I finished up seminary and had taken my Baptist polity class as a independent study with a local pastor, had prepared my ordination paper, hoping that things would work well because we were going to be moving on to the next step. And unfortunately, we had a failure to communicate, and the ordination committee there felt that there were problems because I did not take the Bible literally, and because teaching was not ministry, and because what was a good Baptist like me going on for a degree at a Catholic university. So I had a brief moment of thinking, well, fine, I'll just, and so it ended with, you clearly need to do some thinking. Come back to us after you've thought about all of this. I was tempted to just tell them what they wanted to hear and get done with the process and move on with my life. But a very good friend, I described the situation, and this friend said, well, would you be happy with that? Well, no. So by that point, my parents were back in New York State, and I was able to transfer my membership and the process to, I think at the time it was Living Waters Association. I'm not exactly sure what it's called now, but in the central New York Corning area. And it was a wonderful process because the people that I was working with, including one of my mentors, were people I had done camping and BYF programs with. And I submitted the same identical paper, and all the things that had been objections before were, of course, teaching is ministry. Of course, it's okay as Baptists that we can interpret the Bible differently. It's great that you are building ties and going to a Catholic university. And so we were able to celebrate. And so I was ordained in 1998, and then did a little bit of preaching every now and then while finishing my degree. I went to Notre Dame and occasionally confused the heck out of my students because they would see Reverend in front of my name, and then I would talk about my kids and they'd be scratching. But I did my dissertation, pulling in all the archaeology and other kinds of things about Jewish ritual bathing and how it developed both in terms of various texts through the centuries and the archaeological evidence for it. I never ended up writing the New Testament or early church chapters because I kind of just needed to be done. And I was able to stay for 2 years after finishing my dissertation as a visiting professor, because they always needed people to teach the intro class. And then after applying to about 100 different university teaching jobs, I ended up back in Buffalo, near where I had grown up. And in fact, I always remind my students, don't burn your bridges, because the job I have now and have had since 2005, I applied the year before and didn't get the job. The job opened up again, and it opened up late. And so I got an email that looked more like it was spam from one of the committee members asking, are you still interested in the job? And of course, the answer I wanted to give is, well, what kind of question is like? What kind of question is that? Of course I'm interested.
Right.
And so I was able to get the job. I've been back where I grew up, which means that every now and then there's someone says, oh, I remember meeting you when you were, because there's someone that works at my school whose husband was related to people in my parents' church in Niagara Falls. And it's like, oh boy, I'm not even starting at the school yet, and you're already patting me on the head. But for a couple years, once we were back in the area, I served as co-pastor, both of us part-time, at my home church in Niagara Falls. And then since 2013, I've been serving at a small United Church of Christ congregation, a quarter-time position that actually stays quarter-time. Because, yes, I know, it seems like an urban legend.
Right, it really does.
Their pastor had left. I got a call saying, hey, they're meeting tomorrow night. Would you be interested in meeting with them to talk about supply preaching? And we met. It seemed a decent enough connection. We said, okay, it's going to be 6 months. We'll evaluate after 6 months. And well, it's been since 2013. So 11 years now. And, they knew from the start. Yeah. And I said, look, I'm willing to do this, but my school job is my primary job, and I can't cancel class in order to do a hospital visit. I will get in the car right after class and come visit, but I need your help explaining to the families that this is how it's going to work. And so they've been very protective of my time. Mm-hmm. In some cases, it's meant that people have stepped up to do things because they know that I can't do it. We've been able to have relatively balanced budgets for that time, which would not have been going on if they were still trying to pay for a 20-hour a week or more person. And this little congregation that is, like many of our congregations, graying and struggling, has actually started. So like a year before the pandemic, they started a clothing closet for foster families that has now filled the basement of the church. But each year we're helping 60 to 100 foster kids. And there's other programs like this way on the other end of the county. But if you're a foster parent who suddenly has custody of several young kids and you need clothing, you need cribs, you need furniture, you don't necessarily want to have to drive 45 minutes. And it's really been beautiful how, as I say, a little church that in some ways could be seen as struggling, could be written off by a lot of people, has been able to do this. And we've brought together multiple congregations and organizations in the area to work on this, and adding programs now, looking perhaps to even become a location where they can provide the classes that foster parents need to maintain their certification. So that's sort of how I got from medical missionary plans to where I am now.
Wow. And shout out to your congregation for doing what needs to be done, for supporting you and letting you say, hey, this is my number one, yeah, love you guys and all that, but I have to make these boundaries because I have to do these other things. And wow, I mean,
Exactly.
The
Well,
way it's supposed to work.
That's right. Well, and this year has been a really interesting moment because I was approached by our UCC staff to say that there was someone who is in our UCC version of lay ministry program who needed an internship. And so since October, I've been supervising an intern, which part of me is like, well, what do I know about these things to train somebody else? But it's really been wonderful, and trying as much as possible to let her do her thing without me interfering too much. Obviously, answering questions when she has them, but so for Holy Week, she's been doing a lot in terms of setting the services, because when and if she has a congregation of her own, she's going to need to do that. And also, it was very interesting because we had a program at the college recently where someone was talking about models of mentorship and talking about the sort of like classical literary models where it was basically the teacher mentors the mentees to basically be clones. And I'm like, I don't want a clone. I don't want my intern to be like me. I want my intern to be who she is. And it was really just interesting to have that realization that in some ways explains my frustration sometimes, both in academic circles and in church circles, where I felt sometimes like people, and I can understand the reasons, just want to continue things the way they are instead of, well, let's try something new. The dreaded, we've never done it that way before, or we tried that 20 years ago and it didn't work. Well, there could be so many reasons why we could still try it now and succeed.
Wow. That's really awesome. I mean, I'm thinking about my own and other stories that you hear, and yeah, you can have a mentor who is a wonderful, wonderful human being and has these great relationships with the congregation, but like if you're not able to do the things that you're gonna have to do when you're the pastor, I mean, what have you learned? Because it's not like seminary teaches you how to be a pastor. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah, we did a baptism. You do that class. You baptize a classmate. You do a Eucharist, but it's very different than.
And it doesn't necessarily prepare you for dealing with the church conflicts and how to navigate when both sides are trying to get you on their side. And
if you try and change the bread to gluten-free, I mean, they're like, can't we have both?
That's right.
But you can't put the gluten-free in the same plate as the regular, because then the moisture thing, and
oh yeah,
really, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I get it from both, from having sat in many pews and from standing behind pulpits and beside all those other times that you wish you could just hide. But it's a hard job, but it's also a great job. And yeah, so I'm so glad that your intern has an opportunity to do the things that need to be done, and that you have such a supportive congregation. That's fantastic. So what's one of the biggest things like you've learned on this whole journey?
Well, so one of the things for me has been sort of perseverance and trying to discern between okay, that didn't work because this is just the wrong trajectory for me to be on, and that didn't work because maybe I need to try it a different way. And so, taking, for instance, my path to ordination, I could very easily have said, well, fine, chuck it. I'm just going to focus on teaching and forget the ministry side. I've had a few moments in my teaching career where I've wanted to propose a new course and there have been some roadblocks. And so sometimes I've made the adjustments they asked for, or sometimes I've said, okay, well, I can't teach it in this program, but you know what? The honors program is looking for a course, so we'll just develop it there, and I can do it that way. I spent 2 summers on excavations in Israel, and it was amazing. But I also quickly realized that with young kids, trying to do that every summer was not going to work. I did get to travel twice with students to India, and in fact, on the one trip, I got a walk-on role in a film being made in Calcutta, and they've dubbed over my voice, so my lines of bloody bugger, scalawag, and things like that, sound a little bit different.
Right.
Actually, some of the lines are even more scatological, but I'm in there, and they put my face on the movie poster. And so I jokingly say that I am now the face of British oppression, but just all the unexpected things. And when I'm home, I like routine. I like plans. I like knowing what's going on. And I've somehow discovered and even been able to bring it back home sometimes where I don't need to have the plans. And the movie incident is a perfect example where that just came randomly because we were out in the bar, because I had taken the students out the one evening because there was going to be a discussion at the bar, and this guy comes up, "What are you doing this weekend?" Stranger that I've never met. Why are you asking me this? I'm making a film and I need extras. Well, what he needed was people that looked like angry British professors. So I guess I was typecast. But learning to take those opportunities, because I couldn't take my students on excavations very easily, I've started a project moving 2,000 years into the future, or from ancient artifacts to looking at current stuff. I do projects looking at archival materials from our interfaith group and records of local different congregations, and trying to track the history of Buffalo, including one of the boxes we uncovered in the archives. It was supposed to say Church Women United, and it was all their historical materials. A beautiful typo. They called it Church Women Untied, which kind of works.
Yeah, it does.
And so one of the final things that I've gotten into, again, just sort of trying that, let's try something, let's see how it works, is right before the pandemic, I went to a conference to learn about using simulation games in the classroom. There's a group from Columbia, started at Columbia University, where they develop sort of historical simulations, role-playing games, but real historical situations, not fantasy. And students have to, sort of like Model UN on steroids, have to try to inhabit the role, act and speak using ancient primary texts as if they were one of Socrates' followers, or if they were one of the Athenian senators who really didn't like the rabble-rousers, and then have to sort of adapt their plans based on what the others say and how the votes go. And so this was right before the pandemic, and I ended up incorporating these into all of my classes that fall, because it seemed to be a way, even though we were going to be online, to get the students to interact. And it's worked so well that I have now even written my own short role-playing game about the Jesuits, which will be published very soon and available to colleagues at different schools, particularly being in a Jesuit environment, where we're always trying to help explain to our students the Jesuits. Just like I said, how do you explain to Baptist kids at a camp who the Baptists are? Well, some of the resources for explaining about the Jesuits are a little bit dry. Well, now they can get into a debate, because in the 1700s, the Jesuits actually got suspended and banned by the Pope for a couple decades. And so they get right into the middle of the debate, some people making the accusations, the Jesuits having to defend themselves, and with even the possibility of a little bit of crowd disturbance if they get ignored. And so it's been a very unexpected journey along the way, but some really great opportunities.
That is so interesting. The role playing, I think that's a fantastic way to learn. So it's
really been amazing. I had a student, and this was in an online course, so it makes it even more exciting that they said this. They said that an online asynchronous course where we used these games, that it was an immersive experience.
Wow. That's fantastic.
And so one of my next projects, I'm hoping, is to create some, and these are the kinds of things that you can basically use out of the box, that you can print out the roll sheets, you can print out the scenario and maybe some instructions to get things going. And so I'm looking to try to find some ways to create a game that can be used in youth groups and congregations to have the same kind of conversation. The one idea I had is maybe, okay, your congregation is preparing for its 200th anniversary celebration, and how are you going to tell that history? And both include the founding pastor who did all these things, but maybe you found out later, he was a slaveholder, or this. How are you going to handle this conflict that happened in the early 1900s over prohibition? Our Niagara Falls church, apparently there was a bombing attempt on the church because the pastor had been, if I remember correctly, speaking out in favor of prohibition, and some people didn't like that. How are you going to handle the story of what happened in the 1960s when people wanted to protest the Vietnam War? And how are you going to tell all this story and still keep people together and not splitting up, because, well, that's the part of the story we don't tell about.
Right. We don't talk about Bruno. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about the different ways that people learn, and like the way that I learn, and how I used to enjoy playing The Sims medieval, and and so there you are as the Jacobean cleric or whatever, but to be able to learn like that, and that you have to be able to think, okay, if I'm speaking as one of these followers, this is the way. I love that. I mean, I play. Because I'm not just to play, but because I think I would learn something out of it. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. That is so cool.
Stay tuned. Maybe one of these years at one of the big gatherings.
Yeah. And then we'll be like, look, it's on my show first.
You saw it here.
Right. So, wow. Well, you have to let me know how that goes, and
definitely,
wow. Because if that's, I know I'm a nerd and stuff like that, but that is just, I feel like that is even something, like, my kids are older, but being into the games and all that, especially the simulation games, and that's something that they would go, yeah, Mom, that is kind of,
That's right.
That's not as boring as your books that are about, books that are about books.
Right. Well, and that's also one of the other projects I'm thinking of has grown out of this archival work we've been doing, because we found a transcript from one of the local ministers from, I think, about 1970, when Buffalo City Hall was debating whether or not to allow businesses to be open on Sundays. And we also have materials from our archives about the sort of Council of Churches kind of work supporting racial equity. We have, we also have, this was one of the funniest but most serious finds, a box that we opened it up and there were these posters that said, big red and blue lettering. It says, "Fight the Filth Column." It was an anti-indecency campaign, and so these posters that shop owners could put in their windows saying that they had pledged not to buy, sell, or distribute indecent material, and also little cards that you could sign saying that the inspection committee could come check your store in a couple weeks to make sure there was nothing inappropriate there. And there was the little blue book that listed all the forbidden items, including detective magazines, things like Esquire magazine and Men's Bodybuilding magazine. And we kept going down in the box and discovered samples of those kinds of things, which, of course, being as it was from the 1960s, the Men's Bodybuilding magazine, showed a very buff man in a Speedo, but in the grand scheme of things, that and the line pastel drawing of a college co-ed by 50s standards may have been racy, by modern standards was like ho-hum, but it was just, so I wonder, I'm sure these were just for illustrative purposes, but I can imagine a whole fun kind of scenario talking about, so how do the religious groups interact with City Hall and work together on some things, but then, I don't know, things like gambling opposition, and how do the different religious groups sort of weigh in on that because of bingo and other kinds of things, and how are you going to work together, and how are the churches going to either embrace the civil rights movement or not so much, and so just, but again, the thing we've really found with these games is that obviously there's a play element, there's a competitive element, but it also, some of the games include people who have very strong opinions that might be controversial, or that, we sometimes, the players sometimes have to represent a person that they do not agree with, or a person in a different societal position. So it's always kind of, an example of this is I played a game one time. I have not used it because the game is about Frederick Douglass and abolition. There are some elements of the game that put students in the position of having to say some very offensive things in the debates regarding slavery. But I was playing Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and they gave me the role that has to quote the Bible and talking about the Bible's opposition to slavery. So that was easy for me to inhabit. A woman who's become a friend of mine through using these games was playing a Southern gentleman whose primary job was to shout down Elizabeth Cady Stanton whenever she tried to speak, because what was a woman doing speaking in mixed company? And so it's just the very interesting dynamics of a man playing a woman trying to speak up, and a woman playing a man telling the man, or telling the woman to shut up. And for our students, so like one time I assigned one of my students the role of a woman who was supposed to try to speak up in public but could get silenced by the authorities. And So every time he spoke, I would blow the whistle because he was saying things that he shouldn't. And this was someone who regularly spoke up in class, and just the frustration on his face of, I'm not being allowed to speak. But let's face it, some of my male students could stand to have that realization that they get to speak more often than some of the others. But so that personal experience of realizing, it may be different for someone in a different context, but also of even if we don't agree with someone with different ideas, we can start to understand that they're complicated individuals, that they may have done something that we see now as bad and should be judging and critiquing, but they may have had their reasons. They may have had backgrounds that explained it, and it helps contextualize. It helps develop empathy. It helps them see that this is more than just the clear-cut ways we sometimes tell history. And the last thing I'll say about it is it also helps sometimes make the case that making a slight change, one person deciding to vote a different way, one person deciding to speak up and try to convince people of something, can actually shift the outcome. And so the first game I played, where one of the components was, do we put Socrates on trial? We ended up acquitting him, and he did not get sentenced to death by the Athenians. Now, that's obviously not what happened, but you can have some interesting conversations of, well, we know what happened in history. How did this alternate track happen? Can we do things now in our own time that can maybe shift the arc of history, so to speak?
That is so cool. That is. I wish I had better adjectives right now, but the things that I would definitely be interested in, and I can definitely see where folks in higher education, where that would be far more appealing than just reading a book or 2 or 5, or and putting together a report. Let's engage and let's think this through. And I think it leads itself to deeper and better and more honest conversations than you might have otherwise.
Absolutely.
So as we kind of wrap up here, so the joy question, I got to ask you the joy question. So what is the thing that brings you joy?
Well, so two things immediately come to mind. One is being able to see my kids grow up. The younger one is a junior in college in Pennsylvania. The older one finished the technical theater program last year and has been working on a cruise ship in the Caribbean for 6 months and comes home next week. But also being able to work with my students at the college. Well, sorry, we're a university now. I keep catching myself. But so early on at the college, the campus ministry staff member said, well, we have a retreat this fall, and your name has been suggested as a possible leader. And I said, well, you do realize I'm not Catholic, right? And so for most of the time that I've been here, I've been able to go on campus ministry retreats. And sometimes when there wasn't going to be a priest there, they let the Baptist minister talk about the sacraments, which is a really interesting conversation. Although the sort of focus of the outline was talking about sacraments in everyday life, not just the big 7 or capital S versus small s. Although the one student who now works with me at the college introduced me the one time and said, so John is going to talk about his big S sacraments. And the pause was just perfect. But through that, I've been able to develop connections with students, and I've had students that have worked with me on research projects who now are sort of coming into their own. And so one of my students from about 10 years ago has now in the process of learning to work through her own grief, has written a children's book about grief, and has become certified as a death doula. And so a couple weeks ago, when we had our annual meeting for our interfaith group, she was one of our panelist speakers. And just having the opportunity, again, sort of with mentorship and connecting people and saying, we need somebody to speak about this. I know somebody. And just to be able to see that and see them go in the directions they're going, even though it's not what I might have advised, just as I've sort of forged my own path, which is so far away from what I thought I would be doing when I started college, or even what I thought I would be doing when I arrived here in Buffalo. And seeing the amazing opportunities and the ways to work together. So actually this weekend, I spent time on a retreat with about 15 of our students. And Holy Week is not exactly the ideal time to be trying to do it. But when they invite you and they give you a chance to come into their world, I'm going to try to take those opportunities when I can.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for your time, for coming and sharing a small piece of your story, and I look forward to hearing more about how things progress. I mean, what an awesome thing you get to do. I think it's cool anyway. But so. Reverend Dr. Jonathan Lawrence, thanks for being a part of the Ministry Meg community and for sharing your story. And we thank everybody for watching.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you do for all of us. And hope to talk to you soon.